All right, today we're going to talk about a massive, kind of behind-the-scenes shift that affects pretty much everything you buy. We're talking about forging resilience and how the entire global supply chain is basically being rebuilt from the ground up.
So let me just start with a big question for you. What if the entire invisible system that brings you, everything from your phone to your furniture, what if that whole system is in the middle of a radical reinvention right now?
Because, well, that's exactly what's happening. It might not make the headlines every single day, but believe me, behind the scenes, there's this quiet but absolutely massive revolution going on that's completely redrawing the map of how things move around our planet.
Okay, so to understand where we're all headed with this, we've got to look back at what broke in the first place. Let's start with the pandemic, which really, it just put a giant spotlight on a critical weakness that was kind of hiding in plain sight the whole time.
We all remember this, right? Those endless out-of-stock notices online, walking into a store and just seeing empty shelves, and those just unbelievable waits for things like gadgets or even a new couch. It was maddening. And here's the really important thing to get. This wasn't just some temporary glitch. No, the pandemic was a massive global stress test, and the system just plain failed. It buckled under the pressure in a way that, honestly, almost no one saw coming. So of course, that begs the question, why? Why was the whole system so fragile to begin with? Well, that brings us to the hidden price of efficiency and something called the just-in-time dilemma.
You see, for decades, the entire global economy ran on this philosophy called just-in-time, or JIT. It was actually pioneered by Toyota, and the idea, in theory, it was brilliant. Parts show up at the factory exactly when they're needed. This gets rid of the need for big, costly warehouses. It was seen as the absolute peak of efficiency.
And this right here gets to the absolute heart of the problem. The entire system was built and optimized for one thing and one thing only: efficiency. Lowest cost, highest speed. But in doing that, it completely ignored resilience, the ability to take a punch, to handle a sudden shock. The system was lean, for sure, but it also turned out to be incredibly brittle.
So a good way to think about the old supply chain is like this. Imagine one single, super long chain stretching all the way across the globe. As long as every single link holds, everything's fine. But the second one of those links breaks, the whole chain just snaps. Everything grinds to a halt.
But the story doesn't end with that breakdown. Out of that crisis, a whole new playbook is emerging. And this one is all about forging a much, much stronger and more resilient system.
And make no mistake about it, this is a revolution. We're talking about companies and entire countries fundamentally rethinking a model that has dominated global trade for like half a century. It's a huge deal.
So the new goal is to shift from that single, fragile chain we talked about to a resilient web. Think about it, right? A web has tons of connection points. If one strand breaks, who cares? The traffic can just be rerouted another way. It's flexible, it's got redundancies built in, and it's just so much stronger.
So the question is, how do you actually build this web? Well, the new strategy pretty much rests on three core pillars: diversify, digitize, and relocate. Let's break down exactly what each of those means.
All right, first up, diversify. This is basically that classic idea of don't put all your eggs in one basket. So instead of relying on just one factory in one country, companies are now building relationships with multiple suppliers in totally different regions. That way, if one area has a problem, another one can just pick up the slack. Simple, right?
Second pillar, digitize. Okay, this is where things get really smart. Companies are starting to use AI to actually predict disruptions before they even happen. They're even creating these things called digital twins, which are basically virtual copies of their entire supply chain so they can run simulations and find the weak spots before they become a real-world disaster.
And number three, relocate. This one is all about geography. We're seeing this big rise in nearshoring, which just means moving production closer to where things are sold, and also friendshoring, which is all about partnering up with allied friendly nations to create more reliable supply lines.
Okay, so that's the big picture strategy. Diversify, digitize, relocate. But what does this whole revolution in logistics actually mean for you, for your wallet, for your shopping cart?
Well, let's look at it. In the old reality, we got used to rock-bottom prices, but we lived with the constant risk of sudden shortages. In this new reality, the goal is way more stable and reliable availability. And yeah, while the era of things getting cheaper and cheaper forever might be over, the idea is that prices should become much steadier and not so prone to those wild swings we've seen.
When you boil it all down, the entire purpose of this massive global shift is to fulfill a pretty simple promise: to build a system where you, hopefully, never again have to face that incredibly frustrating wait for the things you want and need.
So, where does all this leave us? Are we actually building a more resilient world? Let's take a quick look at the road ahead. What's crystal clear is that we are right in the middle of a critical economic transformation. Seriously, this isn't just about shipping containers and ports. It's a fundamental rewiring of the entire global economic engine.
But, and this is a big but, there is a trade-off. Building this web, this safety net, well, it isn't free. A stronger, more shock-proof system will almost certainly come with a new and probably slightly higher price tag.
And so that leaves us with the final big question. A smarter, stronger supply chain is being built right now. The goal is a world without empty shelves. But the question for all of us is, are we willing to pay the price for that kind of reliability? Something to think about. Thanks for tuning in.